All Age Media is proud to present The Week Before, a show that encourages discussion, knowledge, and a bit of banter in between. Now presenting Jamie Dyer with this week's special guest.
My guest today is Father Jim. Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Jamie. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well. Yes, a little bit under the weather.
Yeah, you've probably got the same bug that everybody else up here's got, I think.
Yes, indeed. Whereabouts are you?
I am the parish priest of St Anne's Church, which is about 3 miles outside of Manchester. Anyone who knows Manchester, I'm just past Manchester City's football ground.
Oh, yes. Have you ever been?
No. I'm a football fan, I'm afraid.
Oh, well, that's fair enough. You know, there's lots of things on the doorstep sometimes that you don't always see.
No, well, yeah, this is true. I've been here like about 9.5 years now, and once I was really tempted to go, and then it was cold, and I thought I wimped out.
Oh, well, there you are. Yeah, so the first round is the discussion round, and well, today, obviously, as it comes up to the run-up to Christmas, I can imagine you're very busy around that time.
Yeah, Christmas is a very strange time, especially in the Catholic Church, really, because the run-up to Christmas we call Advent, and that is the 4 weeks that runs up to Advent.
Of course.
Where most people are talking about Christmas, Christmas, Christmas. We try and kind of stay off that. Traditionally, the 12 days of Christmas actually starts Christmas Eve. So we kind of try and slot still in the Catholic Church into that area of, we celebrate the Advent period and then we move into Christmas.
Of course. And do you have any particular traditions, perhaps, that other parts of the faith don't have in relation to Christmas?
It depends what you mean, really. I'm not quite sure what some of the Anglicans or the other Christians do, but certainly in the Catholic Church, what we do, for the first 2 weeks of Advent, we look forward to the second coming of Christ, which is kind of what Jesus left us with. He said he would come again. So that's, and the whole purpose of that is to kind of look at ourselves and ask ourselves, if Jesus was to come tomorrow or today, would I be ready? And how would he judge me? That kind of thing. And then the second 2 weeks of Advent, we look back to the first nativity, that first time when Jesus came, which, we recognize that it was a long waiting period. The Jews had been waiting a very, very long time for the Messiah. And so it's a kind of a reflection on the promise that God made good by sending Jesus. And then we have the great celebration of Christmas.
Yeah, it all sounds very, very interesting. I mean, do you have a run-up of events in the church on the run-up to Christmas?
Yeah, we do, yeah. Mainly, there's a lot that goes on in our Catholic schooling system. The children at the moment are practicing for the Christmas nativities, which will be in the last couple of days of their term, just before they go away on their break.
Of course.
And they also have a series of kind of Advent-themed assemblies, which they do, and they welcome parishioners in, and they welcome people who live in and around the area of the school. They love to go in. It's brilliant to see so many people going in. And then, of course, I have, there are good times around the Advent and Christmas time, but I've only just heard yesterday that I've got a baby's has died. So that's a very sad period. And that's part of the remit of my job. One day it's incredibly sad. And then the next day you go in and watch the children, and it's really lifts your soul. It's an amazing time, So it is very interesting time for me, for sure.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always admired about people in your profession is your ability to handle, obviously high events as well as the more kind of somber. You have to deal with a variety of situations.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we spend a long time in college. We kind of do 6 years preparation, but it's one of the things that can never prepare you for. It's kind of really your own spirituality, and you as a person, I think, that learns to deal with, a funeral one day and a wedding the next day. I've actually had a funeral and a wedding on the same day, which is a bit tricky, but it has happened in the past. And it's one of those things that you kind of learn to deal with. It's not easy, honestly.
Well, no, because obviously you can't prepare, because obviously those things. Obviously, a wedding is planned, but the other side isn't. I mean, at Christmas time, obviously it is that time. I think. Do you find in your particular congregation, do you find that more people come over Christmas time maybe than other times of the year?
Absolutely. I think it's the same in every church. It's not over Christmas time. It's just Christmas Eve, Christmas Day.
Yeah.
The church will be heaving. My church actually seats about 230 people. For Christmas Eve, I'll have nearly 600 in it.
Wow.
The stud's 10 deep at the back. I have to put about 100 chairs behind me on the sanctuary. It's heaving. People are everywhere. But it's great to see them, you know.
Yeah, and obviously those services, you have hymns and readings and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the Christmas Eve service here is very popular because we have 6:15 in the evening, which is always dark here, obviously, at that time. I started, when I came here, a Christmas carol service by candlelight, and that lasts 45 minutes, and then that runs straight into our main mass for the evening, which is at 7 o'clock.
Yes, and as you said, it gets very busy.
Oh, yes, it does. In fact, one of the only problems that I have is people kind of bickering over parking spaces, really.
I would imagine the area that you're in, there must be ample parking space.
I have 2 car parks of my own, but I can only put about maybe 70 cars on between those 2 car parks. They're quite small. And then we are able to park, thank goodness, on the street out in front, which is one of the main thoroughfares into Manchester, but there are no parking restrictions. But people do park kind of a mile up the street, really. The neighbours never like it, but it never lasts that long, thank goodness.
I suppose on Christmas, I suppose people don't always worry about parking either, because they're all going to the same place.
Yeah, we have. It's like, there's 1 or 2 of my neighbours who have like drives into their houses.
Yeah.
And, people who get really touchy about parking, they will park over their drives. So if anybody wants to go out to see family on Christmas Eve, they get stuck, and then I can get in trouble for that. But I mean, I do ask people, before we begin, if you are parked over anybody's drive, please go and move your car. It's a great way to start the celebration.
Well, yeah, I can imagine that. I've always wondered, actually, I know you get very busy over Christmas time. What about New Year? Do you have a lot of services over New Year as well, or just New Year's Eve?
No, funnily enough, New Year is absolutely very, very quiet. There's no service here as such as a New Year's Eve mass. We just have a normal mass in the morning at 9:15, like we would do every day of the year. And then again, the same on New Year's Day itself. I used to do mass on New Year's Day at midday, knowing people had been out partying the night before and thinking that would give people time to come round and get to mass. But I've actually found that the same people who come to the midday mass will happily come to the 9:15 in the morning mass as well. So I've just moved it. I've found as a priest that it is just routine. People like routine in the church, and if you start moving masses around, they get confused, and they end up missing services. So I do try and keep as many of my masses at the same time as I can.
Of course, I mean, as you say, it's very much a routine thing. Obviously, when you're planning these things, do you have like a committee, like a board that you talk to rectify any changes?
Not as such, not within the Catholic Church. The Anglican Church has that kind of makeup, but here I'm the boss, but don't tell anyone that. So really, it's down to me, really. I mean, I have musicians that I deal with, and I have readers and Eucharistic ministers and people that help with the car parks, but they all know that I'm a man of routine. So they'll know that the carol service starts at 6:15, mass starts at 7, and I do have a meeting with them just to say, is everything okay? Have we got enough volunteers? And everything's usually great.
Yes, and you hit upon the voluntary kind of thing. That you get a lot of volunteers all year round.
Absolutely, thank goodness. Really, I couldn't work this place without it. And I have volunteers that range from people who man the car parks, that clean the church, that clean the hall, and then I have people who are sacristans. They kind of set up for the services. I have people who welcome the parishioners at the door, people who hand out hymn books. I've got people who do my accounts for me. So there's a whole kind of plethora, and they all do it for nothing, all voluntary.
Well, that's wonderful. That's really nice to hear. Right, so let's. I think we obviously, as with any subject, it's a huge scope, and we'll move on to round 2 here, which of course is the Tell Me About round. And yes, indeed, I'll give you 15 seconds to talk about a specific subject. If once those 15 seconds have ended, then and I think that you can talk about it in more detail, then I'll give you another 15 seconds. Have I made that clear?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Go on.
Yes, indeed. Right, so this is completely improvised. Obviously, I haven't told you beforehand what these are, which usually makes it more interesting. So I'll give you 15 seconds in the first thing to talk about your church nativity, if that's okay. And I'll give you 15 seconds starting from now.
Okay, well, first of all, we have the classic show of nativity statues, which everybody loves to come and have a look at. But the main nativity, of course, will be from our school children, and they are coming across. Our school is separate from the church by about 500 yards, so they come from school to do it here. So we push the altar back and we do the nativity on our sanctuary, which is a little bit unusual. It was certainly never done here before I came, and it's done on a number of days because we have obviously the younger kids and the older children.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and obviously trying new things as well. Do you find it? Is it popular? Do you get lots of people coming to see it?
Oh yes, it's very popular. It's one of the very few times actually that our parents from the school will come, to kind of cross that barrier from the school into the church. They'll come at other times, like for their children's First Holy Communion, or confirmation, or whatever else is going on with the sacramental program.
Of course.
Children follow. But certainly the nativity is one that will bring them in busloads, really.
Of course, yeah. Well, let's move on to the next subject here, and I'm going to ask you about hymns, actually. I'd like to know about the hymns that you'd use maybe in your one of your Christmas services, if possible. We will start that from now.
Well, every mass throughout the year actually is themed, and all the hymns that we pick usually are based around the readings that we use in church, and there's always a theme to the readings. Now, Christmas is obviously kind of speaks for itself, so things like when is he coming, Lord Redeemer, that's one. And then we would move on to things which are very much more well known, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, the beautiful ones that everybody likes, like Silent Night, Holy Night, and we do all the Christmas carols. So between the service on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, we would sing, and of course the carol service, we would get through maybe 25, maybe 30 specific hymns for Christmas. You would probably call them Christmas carols, but of course we would call them hymns.
Of course, yeah. I mean, what's the difference between a carol and a hymn, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, some people who sing Jingle Bells, that's a Christmas carol.
Of course.
But it has nothing to do with Jesus or religion or God or any mention of that.
Yes.
So that's basically the difference.
Well, there we go. That's very straightforward. Yes. Let's move on to the third round here. Thank you very much for talking about those there. And let's move on to the third round, which is the What's on Your Mind round, where I turn it completely over to you. And this could be absolutely anything. So, Father Jim, please tell me what's on your mind.
Injustice at the moment.
Injustice? How so?
Well, a couple of things. Our children actually in school, our oldest children in our primary school, year 6, they've been covering injustice for the last half of their term, which was of it. I go into school every day, so I'm kind of well up to date with what's going on in our school. And then, you find yourself perhaps on the end of injustice, because there's one thing in my life that I cannot deal with, really. I can deal with most things, but anything that's unjust really kind of gets me goat, I think. And we had an inspection in school recently, and I thought it was a little unjust. I know my school better than the inspectors that were coming in, and they said a couple of derogatory things about the school, which I know are absolutely not the case. It's just not true. So I am trying to right that at the moment, even as we speak. So it's a difficult one, but injustice is something that we see all of the. When the children were asking me about injustice, one of the things that we do here, we have an adopted charity here, which is it's an orphanage that two of my friends built over in Kenya in Africa. And maybe 10 days ago, I don't know if you remember the story of the little baby that was found in Australia down a well in the searing heat.
Right.
And I was trying to explain to the children what injustice was. And I said to them, they'd all heard this story. I said, isn't that funny though? I said, because in our orphanage, we've got 3 children who were found in virtually the same situation. One of them was found in a black bag on top of a skip, about a day and a half old.
Oh,
and
no.
Isn't it funny that because that child is from a third world country and not Australia, which is a first world country, that I don't even think it made the local press. They weren't interested. Certainly didn't make the national or international press. And I thought that was a really good way of trying to show the children kind of, what injustice really means.
Yeah, no, I think you've illustrated there, 2 perfect examples actually, and that's quite shocking that wasn't even mentioned even in local press.
Yeah, I don't think it even made, and there is a local amateur radio that's broadcast around, didn't even make the amateur radio show. Very sad, really.
Oh, it is, yes, and the school inspectors, I think most of the time sometimes they're kind of judging from one rule book, whereas many schools, need to be judged on their own terms, really.
Yeah. I find, I can understand when they come in, there is a kind of a set scheme, a set framework, if you like, that they're looking for. And we find ourselves having to jump through hoops to try and show them that it's all right. Well, actually, if they came in unannounced and we didn't know who they were, and they actually waltzed around my school watching what was going on, they would see, what I consider to be an outstanding school. I mean, I've been the chair of governors here for nearly 10 years, and I've been chair of governors in previous schools that were not, as good as the one that I'm in now. So I am biased in as much as, I'm heavily involved in the school. But if anybody tells me that there's an error in the school and it's true, I would be the first to jump and say, okay, how can we put this right? But what the inspectors were saying, I just couldn't see as true, really.
Well, no, because as you say, I think most of the time those inspections actually cause more problems than they solve, really, because people are a bit more. You kind of, as you say, if people didn't know they were coming and they just, they were just walking around. If they were just a parent walking around, they'd see how good the school was, really.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got, it's only a single intake school, so I can only take 30 children a year. Last year we had 87 names trying to get those 30 places. So we must be doing something right.
Definitely. Right, so there we are. That is the end of the 3rd round there, which kind of brings us to the end of the show here. But I've heard that in fact, I've actually listened to a couple. You've got your own podcast, haven't you?
Yeah, I do a number of different things, actually. I have a radio show which goes out on it's an internet-based radio show, and it goes out on Heavens Road FM, which is specifically, and it's the only specific Catholic radio station in the country. That's based in Wannish down in London. So I do a regular show for them. I think I've done about 50, 60 shows for them.
Yeah.
I also do a local podcast, which is like a talking newsletter, and that's for my people specifically here. And then I also started to do a podcast recently called Just a Catholic Priest, which is available on YouTube, on iTunes rather. And the reason I did that was on the radio program, we were looking really at vocations in all kinds of walks of life.
Yes.
And then they asked me to talk about vocations to the priesthood. And I thought, I'm just wondering how many people out there don't actually know what a Catholic priest does in the day. So I kind of started Just a Catholic Priest as a show of my diary, really, because believe me, I get involved in all kinds of things.
I can imagine.
There was one issue about a year ago here where I had a thumping on the back door. I opened the back door, and there's a girl crawling on the floor, covered in blood, had a compound fracture of her ankle, and that involved ambulances and police and all sorts of things going on here. To the death of a child, which happened yesterday, and everything in between. I have a very odd life, and it's one of those very strange things. I don't know who's going to be on the end of the phone when I pick it up, and I don't know who's going to be at my door when it knocks. So you kind of have to be ready for anything and everything, really.
Yeah, I always find those kind of vocational podcasts and things very interesting to listen to, because obviously, as you say, people don't realise just how much work you put into your job, and it just kind of illustrates maybe even just a tiny fraction of what you do, really.
Yeah, and I mean, the Just a Catholic Priest podcast, I think I've done maybe 9, maybe 10 of them. I can't quite remember. It's still relatively new. And what I didn't want to do was for it to be, this is my diary, this is what I've done for the day. So what I try and do now is to give examples of what's happened, like yesterday, for instance. I am also a person who uses sign language for the deaf.
Yes.
And so I have been given the job now. I'm the chaplain to the deaf in the diocese. And yesterday we welcomed to the Salford diocese our brand new bishop. He's a man called Bishop John Arnold, and he's come from the Westminster diocese. We had a huge celebration yesterday, maybe 15, maybe 1,800 packed into our cathedral. And I was interpreting yesterday. So that was, and it's the first time. I mean, I usually do it to about 50, 60 deaf people. It's the first time I've ever done it with that kind of, amount of eyes looking at me. And I was really under pressure.
Well, I can imagine it's very, very nerve-wracking.
I was petrified. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, that kind of that brings us to the end of the show. But I'd like to thank you very much for coming on today and talking to us.
Been a delight, Jamie. Thank you for asking me.
And I hope all the festivities and things in the church go well, and Advent and such go well for you.
You're very kind, thank you. I'm sure everything will be okay.
And good luck with the podcast and everything else that you're involved in. And don't forget, you can go and check out the podcasts that he mentioned previously. And from me, Jamie Dyer, this has been The Week Before, and we'll see you on the next edition.
You've been listening to The Week Before, a weekly recorded show presented by Jamie Dyer, with this week's special guest. The announcer was Katie Harvey, and this has been an all-age media production. Thank you for listening.